So, the Harpy boss in the Spire of the Watcher dungeon. If you're going it solo as a Warlock, this might be a tripping point for you. If not a tripping point, it could turn into a fairly lengthy task if you're not kitted out correctly. The boss has a lot of health, and if you're not dealing good damage, it's going to take a lot of damage cycles to finally finish him off. And Warlocks in this fight in particular don't quite seem to have the damage potential that Hunters and Titans can achieve. So me and my buddy Twisted Owl spent a lot of hours and tried many different setups trying to make this a more manageable task for a Warlock. And the build I got for you here I think works fantastic. It's not a new build per se, I've seen raid teams use this for boss DPS for quite some time, mainly paired up with Reed's Regret. But from start to finish in this encounter, it just works out extremely well. But it's not just the damage it can provide, it's the consistency, the practicality, and the limited in-game setup that it needs to get it going. What it does require is a few specific pieces to make it work, as all builds do, so let's hop into it. For the subclass, Shadebinder Warlock, and the most important aspect here is going to be Glacial Harvest. Freezing an enemy creates stasis shards around the frozen target, and these stasis shards are going to be the metaphoric fuel that makes the motor run here. For aspect 2 I take Bleak Watcher, strictly for the boss. The stasis turret can help us get a quick and passive freeze on the boss as soon as damage opens up. For the fragments, Whisper of Fissures to increase the damage and size of a stasis blast, Whisper of Conduction so any stasis shards generated get pulled towards us, Whisper of Hedrons, which buffs stability, airborne effectiveness, aim assist, mobility, resilience, and recovery when freezing a target, and Whisper of Rhyme, which does give us a portion of a timed overshield on every stasis shard that we collect. For your abilities, the only real toss-up here I think is going to be the Rift. Healing Rift is going to be great for general survivability, and I found you really don't need an Empowering Rift, unless you're heading into the Harpy's damage cycle, not charged with light. But getting charged is easy enough to pull off, so I tend to stick with the Healing Rift, just in case. Moving on to our weaponry, and the featured exotic of the build, AGER'S SCEPTER. The Stasis Trace Rifle is going to be our damage tool, and it's very important that you do have the catalyst unlocked. When your super's full, you can hold reload, and the weapon will start to slowly drain your super meter. In return, you get about an 80% boost to the weapon's damage, an overflowed magazine, and it slows and freezes targets on hits, not just on kills. So you gotta have it to hit the damage numbers that you're gonna see coming up. For your heavy weapon, bring a grenade launcher. If you have a Typhon with explosive light, that's probably gonna be your overall best option in this setup. If not, any grenade launcher will do the trick. We really only need it for one shot per damage phase. That leaves your energy slot open, and I personally like to bring a precision bow because it can one-shot the Harpies. If you're not into bows, just bring something that can help keep those things from piling up on you. For our exotic armor piece, Transversive Steps, which is often viewed as a PvP exotic, but it really does work great in this fight. The extra sprint speed and the auto-reloading of weapons is much appreciated during the body of the encounter, and a timely sprint reload during the damage phase is really going to help push up our overall damage output. For the armor mods, in the interest of brevity, I'm just going to go over the more important ones. On our class item, we're going to want both Solo Operative and Weakened Clear. Solo Operative is a universally stacking 15% damage boost. Weakened Clear, when hitting a target with a grenade launcher, it'll apply a 15% weaken debuff. Next, Elemental Shards. It slots on stasis armor only, but this one's a biggie. It allows those stasis shards that we're creating from the Glacial Harvest aspect to function as stasis elemental wells. This in turn allows us to make use of Font of Might, a universally stackable 25% weapon damage boost for weapons whose elemental affinity matches that of the well collected. So, AGER'S Scepter. But we're also going to be taking Elemental Charge, so when picking up a well, we'll also become charged with light. This is going to allow us to make use of High Energy Fire as well, which stacks just fine with everything we have going on already and piling on another 20% more damage. Outside of that, I run a Trace Rifle Finder and Reserves mod just to keep AGER'S Scepter with ammo, a Harmonic Siphon mod because I need to generate at least one orb of power to fuel Typhon's explosive light perk, and I do have 2 Trace Rifle Loader mods slotted on just in case I screw up really bad on the eyeballs and need a quick reload. And the rest there is really up to you. If you want to see the full build or copy the full build directly, the dim link to it will be in the pinned comment. And with the formalities out of the way, on to the good stuff. Let's take a look at those damage buffs again real quick. 15% from Solo Operative, 20% from High Energy Fire, 25% from Font of Might, 80% from AGER'S Catalyst, and a 15% debuff from Weakened Clear. To get our overall damage multiplier, we multiply all those numbers together, which works out to 3.57. Now versus the Harpy boss, AGER'S Scepter's true base damage is only 1,764 per round. When all of those buffs get stacked together, we're looking at 6,296 per round, an extremely healthy damage increase. If you want some sort of DPS breakdown, as soon as you activate the buffed fire mode, you're getting 194 rounds in the magazine. Multiply that by 6,296 and it works out to just over 1.22 million in single mag damage. Time to empty out all 194 rounds, I had clocked in at 12.88 seconds. So that's 94,831 in terms of single mag damage per second. But we're actually going to get a little more help when beaming down the boss. Periodically you'll see damage jump up to 6,611 because we're damaging a frozen target. And every time the boss breaks free of the freeze, that's another 11,288 points of damage. So when averaging the beam numbers together and accounting for about 14 shatters, that puts us just over the 100k mark in terms of damage per second. Now do keep in mind though, damage can and will fluctuate a little bit depending on your power level. I'm sitting at 1600. A little higher than that, you'll probably do a bit more damage. Lower than that, you're going to deal decreased damage. But your output's still going to be pretty stinking good. So let me walk you through a damage phase and you can see all this happening in action. Just before I close out the final node, I wipe out the last little group of goblins with AGER'S SCEPTER, so I'm going into the fight charged with light. Then as the boss begins to make its approach to my position, I'll throw out the Bleak Watcher turret. To take care of the eyeballs, I'm going to use AGER'S SCEPTER for that as well. Now, trace rifles may not be the best weapon to take care of them, but they do get the job done pretty efficiently. And as I'm sure you know, the quicker you are, the better. The more time you spend breaking these eyeballs, the less time you're going to have to damage the boss. And honestly, the best way to get quicker at it is repetition. Practice. Kinda just find a pattern that works out for you and stick with it. Every time. As soon as the last eye gets popped, get your grenade launcher out immediately and put weak and clear on the boss. Because we have an explosive light Typhon here, we are getting that little bit of extra damage from the one shot. It's not much, but more damage is more damage. Then immediately get your AGER'S SCEPTER back out, proc the buffed fire mode, and start walking the Harpy down the sidewalk like a dog. As you keep the beam on him, he's going to be constantly freezing and shattering, and generating stasis shards, which keeps our Font of Might buff up and active. And I'll stick right on the edge as I'm going down the line. There are those two holes in the walkway, and you don't want to fall down them. You'll definitely miss out on some damage if you do. Now as you get toward the end, the magazine on AGER'S is going to empty out. But there is some time left on the damage buff still. Our super meter isn't completely depleted yet. Now if you were to just let AGER'S SCEPTER manually reload, the buff ends right there. Which is where Transversive Steps really comes in handy. Sprinting for 1.5 seconds will reload the magazine without canceling the damage increase. So once you get that sprint reload in, you can start backpedaling while still putting damage on the boss, and avoid taking too much damage from the blast back. Now if things work out, you're quick on the eyes and you get pretty much every shred of damage on the boss, you should be right in the neighborhood of 2.1 million per cycle. I figure the health pool on the boss is about 6.1 million, so this can result in a 3 phase. There is a small hangup though. If you look here, the damage from AGER'S beam drops to about 5,000 a tick for a brief period. I believe this happens when the Font of Might timer expires while Glacial Harvest is on cooldown. And this window here was brief, we only dropped the buff for about 20 rounds. But with the damage margins being so tight to hit that 3 phase, I do think a 4 phase clear by far is the more probable outcome. But with the amount of damage we're cranking out here, even though we are most likely looking at a 4 phase, we're talking about a very comfortable 4 phase. We have a lot of damage potential here, which leaves you a good amount of wiggle room for error. It's just a very user-friendly setup, especially since there's absolutely no equipment juggling going on here. You're not constantly running back into your menus, equipping this, unequipping that. The setup is the setup, you know, the build's the build. What you have equipped at the start handles everything. And probably my absolute favorite part of this setup is it does not rely on heavy ammo drops. 99% of the work is being done with AGER'S SCEPTER, a special weapon. And in my experience, as long as I was taking time to kill a few goblins along the way, special ammo bricks were not at all hard to come by. I mean, you don't want to be wasteful with the ammo, but in my experience, there's usually going to be plenty of it out there. But even during the body of the encounter, during the arc node activation, the build flows really nicely. Transversive steps allow you to get around the map a little bit quicker, which gives you some extra time to kill the ads, get some ammo drops, fill your super meter. And you still should have plenty of leeway to get all the nodes on all sides without dropping your Arctrician buff. And using a stasis subclass does add some nice survivability aspects. Whisper of Hedrons is boosting your recovery and your resilience, and Whisper of Rhyme can allow you to build up an overshield for some additional damage mitigation. So for this fight, it just feels like a very complete build. I mean, on average for a 4 phase clear, it was usually taking me about 14 minutes from start to finish. And no, we're not breaking any speed records with that time, but it's still a very manageable window to get the encounter done. And as a solo Warlock, if this fight was giving you some trouble historically, I really hope the video and the build help out. If you have any thoughts on how to optimize it anymore, drop it down in the comments, I'm all ears. Or if you want, leave the build that you've been running. I'm always interested to hear what everyone else is going at it with. But with all that being said, thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out the video. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.